and welcome to the Audiophile Barista's weekly vlog number 97, where I talk about audio, coffee and other things that keep me busy. And this morning I was reading on AudioGone a post, why do so many audiophiles reject blind testing of audio components? And this is of course the everlasting cable discussion. Now I was planning and I had already filmed some things, but this morning I thought, well, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I was reading that conversation and there's the ever returning mess of it's true, it's not true. So I sat down, I wrote a little script, I put some video on it, and this is it. Let me know what you think about it. Okay, so the point that I'm trying to make today is that blind listening tests do not lead to people can't hear a difference, therefore it is bias or placebo. Now you all know that one of the hottest topics in this hobby is, do cables make a difference? And along with that topic there's another one that is being debated a lot, which is a blind listening test the holy grail to decide on these differences? Now the skeptic community thinks that blind tests have already demonstrated that there are no differences, but I think this is a bit premature. Now let me start with telling you where I stand in this debate. First off, I don't think either side has been proven wrong or correct, but I do know that when I am sitting in my listening chair, I experience differences. As a matter of fact, some 30 years ago my audio dealer gave me some loudspeaker cables to try at home. He did not tell me what I could expect. He just told me, try them out and report back. And that day I discovered that cables make a difference. I heard so much more details on the same CDs that I was so extremely familiar with that I just could not ignore it. Now, do I know why I hear these differences? Or do I understand the science behind it? Well, the answer is no. Now, for some skeptics, this means that if I don't know, they are somehow correct. But that's just nonsense, of course. Now, the reason that this topic is on top of my mind lately is because there are more and more articles appearing that are trying to make a case for why we might be hearing these differences. Townsend Audio has produced a device that can measure these differences, PS Audio is backing that paper, and also lately there has been an actual challenge to demonstrate that there are differences. The people from Synergistic Research have challenged the people from Audioholics, telling them to take all their measuring equipment to their facility to do all the tests that they want to do, but also to do a listening test. And this session was to be recorded in high resolution audio so the viewers could also participate. Now unfortunately this whole process became a complete mess with threats of lawsuits and other stuff, so this is probably not going to happen. But the reason I'm telling you this is because I sense that there is more and more information appearing that may make the case for my main question: why do I experience differences in cables? Now the skeptic community will immediately jump to it is all bias, or it is all in your head, or it's just the placebo effect. Now I'm not saying it could not be any of those. My point is that I don't think that that is what a blind test proves, and that the skeptic family is just all too happy to jump to that conclusion. But in my version, a blind test just demonstrates that under those circumstances it is harder to define the subtle differences between, for example, cables. But it does not answer the question, why is it more difficult? Now there are many publications that describe the flaws of blind tests, and the main thing seems to be that it is extremely difficult to design the test in a way that it is set up to only test for that specific one thing that you want to test. It's not impossible, but it will be very, very costly. Another problem, in my opinion, is how do you know that you are testing for bias or the placebo effect? My guess is that most DIY blind tests can only conclude that it is more difficult to hear differences under those circumstances, but they do not prove bias or placebo. Especially I think placebo is very unlikely. And why is this? Well, in placebo testing, and remember, I'm not an expert, but in placebo testing you compare some medicine. I use this example because that is a common area where placebo is tested. But you compare a medicine that is working against a medicine that is not working or does not have the same medical ingredients. So how does that translate to a blind test for cables? Are you going to compare a cable that does make a difference against a cable that does not make a difference? I mean, that would be pointless because the question is already answered if you can use a cable that does make a difference. And that's just what we are trying to test. Another thing that makes me doubt that a blind test is a test for bias is the next thing. You know this trick where you pinch your nose and it becomes much more difficult to taste your food? Well, if you actually have a blind test where the participants can't see the equipment that is being used, you do take away one of your senses. So maybe, just like pinching your nose, could that be the reason that it is harder to hear these subtle nuances? I don't know, but it's a question that I have. Or what if the fact that you are stressed because of the test itself affects your ability to hear these nuances? What I mean by that is, maybe you want to do this test as good as possible. You want to hear the differences. Or, and let me be very clear about this, if you are a skeptic, you might be biased because you do not want to hear a difference. I mean, you have been shouting all over the internet that it's just nonsense, so why would you not be stressing your brain and hear no differences because of that? Or what if you have a mixed group of people in the testing group? People who think there are differences and people who think there are no differences. What if this puts you in a state of competition, again putting stress on your brain, and now you can hear no differences because of the stress, because it may be that the nuances in the differences in cables are very small, and if they are, it just might be enough to stress your brain like that, which makes it so much harder to hear the differences, and the end result is that it's just like a 50-50, and the skeptics will say, you see, there are no differences. But maybe this test only demonstrated that if you stress your brain, it is much harder to hear nuances. And I think that these blind tests are not designed to test for those things. They just demonstrate that it is more difficult. But they do not tell you why. At least that is the point that I wanted to make today. And there's some last few things that I want to say about it. Another frequently heard talking point from the skeptic community is, well, you paid money for your cable, so you want to hear a difference. Now, of course, the same goes for skeptics. They have been telling everybody that there are no differences, so they do not want to hear a difference. And also, what about people who just visit me in my house? They did not pay anything for these cables. They may not even know how much they cost. This is my system, it's not their system. I try and make them hear the differences, and they do. Some do, some don't. But this talking point, you paid money so you want to hear the differences, is completely invalid for that situation. So how does that work? Or, if it is indeed all bias, let's assume that it is bias and that it is all inside my head, then I don't know how to explain that different people can hear the same differences. What I mean is they will say a cable will sound a certain way, and many different people will all say the same thing about how this cable sounds. But does that mean that we have exactly the same bias? Is that a thing? I don't know, guys. I just wanted to give you some food for thought. These are things that keep me busy in this whole discussion of, do these things like cables, do they work or do they not work? I know I hear a difference. I do not know why I hear a difference. And every discussion you read on the internet has as many people saying this is why it is working and this is why it is not working. So it's something that's still not decided. And my point was to tell you guys, to share with you my thoughts on why I think that this do a blind listening test and you will see is not correct. Anyways, I hope you like this part. Let me know in the comment section what your ideas are, and if you have any scientific research or other papers that might help me in this quest, please share it. Send it to the audiophilebarista@gmail.com. And now let's finish this vlog. Okay, so that was my issue for today. Next week there's another vlog. Today is Friday. I'm wishing you all a very nice weekend, and I'll see you next week.